Hi, this is Andrea Kennedy with Wiser Wealth and Amanda Edwards with Tidy My Money. This is Inside My Wallet podcast, and it's topic number 6. We're going to be talking over the next few podcasts about conversations that we have to have with others about money. And today we're going to focus on spouses, partners, but we do want to say something to anyone who might be single and watching this. So Amanda, I'm gonna let you take it.
Yeah, I think when we started to look at this topic, like the subject matter, we realized that it's huge. Like conversations with money can go on as long as we could talk for hours. So we've, tried to distill it down so that it's in parts so that, people can kind of look at a section and look at it deeply. But, we feel absolutely that conversations around money are absolutely necessary. They're unavoidable in your life, in your adult life. And we call them the terrible D's as well, and people like to avoid thinking about them, but we have divorce, disability, dementia, and ultimately death. And if you avoid conversations about money, you can really run into real trouble on any of those topics. And it happens all the time. And I think that if you've been following our podcast so far, you'll know that, everyone has this money narrative and this way that they're thinking themselves about money. And they bring that to the table every time they are talking to another person, be that a spouse or family, etc. And so it's really important to know that you can have this emotional money narrative in yourself, but actually you have to go forward putting emotions aside. That's right. I do want to say that conversations about money ideally need to be emotionless. So it's not that you don't have the emotion going on inside your body. You do have the emotion going on, but you actually don't let that come out while you're having conversations. So you try to really hold on to those so that you can have a clarity of thought, and that your conversation is as an adult and to another adult, so that you can remove these emotions and these feelings, trying to pull people into your anxiety or your worry or things like that. It doesn't help. And we're going to, discuss like role play or discuss ways to have those, conversations, but it's absolutely necessary to talk about money. And the better you get with money, the more conversations you're going to have. I mean, you're going to start tidying up things.
And the more often you talk about it, you'll normalize it, right? Even if you're anxious at first, the more you find a way to talk about it, the more this conversation will become normalized. And I think the reason that we started out having the data points of cash flow and balance sheet is because it gives you something that isn't emotional to talk about, that's fact, right? And if you are following your balance sheet and you see it grow, ideally we're seeing our balance sheet grow and get bigger, we can start measuring things like, oh, what is the return on our investments, right? Like how much are we making on our investments every year? And then that's another way to measure things that is not an emotional topic, but rather just a way to look at something and to kind of, I hate to say the A word, but analyze something. That's no one's fault. That's just the way it is. And this is kind of just to add on to the beginning of this is, I always, whenever I get a client couple in, I say, the first thing I kind of ask myself as I'm talking to them is I try to understand if these people are a team, because that's what you have in a marriage. You essentially have a team, and a team plays best when they're on the same side. Yeah. And a lot of people fight about money, but sometimes they're fighting about things. Money's a platform that they fight over, but they're actually fighting about other things. And it can become, power struggle centered. But basically, if you are on the same team and you have the right intention, right, to be financially successful or to be financially secure, if you have the right intention, you're on the same team, much can be resolved by honestly just going through the work that we're covering in our podcasts.
Yeah.
And you can go again into the right direction, right? This is all about getting on the same team, having the same intent, and going in the right direction using the same material, right? So we're both looking at the spreadsheet, we're both looking at the balance sheet.
Yeah.
And that will help take some of the emotion.
Yeah.
I think out of the conversation as well.
Yeah. And I think that, people do, if you are not having these or if you haven't had these conversations regularly, the initial, when you're lost, and especially if the numbers aren't what they should be, or if your financial position isn't clear to you if you're in a partnership. Or for example, if you're single and you kind of looked at our request to do some data points in your cash flow and balance sheet, and you think, well, that doesn't affect me yet. I'm not in a relationship yet, or I don't have dependents yet, so I don't need to get into this. But we're trying to say you do need to get into those numbers. And sometimes you may feel uncomfortable where you are with them, but you have to put that aside and then do the work, which is the talking about it, to try to get to a place to understand it. And that means really kind of becoming very factual and very practical about what you're trying to do. I mean, I mentioned then we are going to talk about a partnership, but if you are single without dependents and you kind of go, I don't need to get into this now, the earlier, and if you've heard us preach before, I mean, the earlier you start your financial journey, the better you are. So you do need to get into it. Don't avoid it if you can. We're going to go on to now partnerships. And if you're single, then this is a great conversation to stay in and on and listen to, because you could become, become a great conversation manager in your future new relationship, where you talk about money practically and you look at it and having conversations. So,
and I would just add, if people aren't, if people are single and watching this, I think I always say one of the red flags, and we'll get into red flags later, but kind of one of the red flags is if you're dating someone who's uncomfortable talking about money, or they don't want to talk about money. I mean, I think that's kind of, I would have a hard time, being forever with someone who had difficulty talking about this. So I think it is important to recognize that this is something we've been made uncomfortable to feel uncomfortable talking about, which is silly because it's part of all of our lives. There's a lot of control in making people feel uncomfortable talking about something.
Yeah.
So the best way to kind of give everybody a bit of control is to have the same data and to begin the conversation. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about how you have a conversation if you've never had one. You all of a sudden want to pull this together. What would you say?
So I'm thinking in the mind of somebody that has sat down and done the cash flow and the balance sheet. And let's say, for example, they couldn't complete it all, right? So they're in a partnership and they know half the information. There is someone who is taking care of things, and perhaps it's not them. Or perhaps it is them and they realize that they have not shared any of this with their partner. So we don't want to make this into a masculine, feminine, fight in a sense, but there does seem to be a tendency towards, that men and partners tend to be looking after the money, and the wife's looking after the house, even in 2021, even in 2022, where we are.
2022, yeah. I say the 21st century.
We still have this, imbalance, which we all know. COVID taught us that as well. There is a definite default and imbalance. And I'm going to say, if you haven't got into it, if you are, a lady that hasn't got into it, you have to, and you can't say you don't have time, because you are very, very susceptible then to problems later, being just like blindsided by so many things. You can't have that, and you can't have anybody say, don't worry your pretty little head about it either. You have to be very, very, you don't have to do all the legwork potentially, but you have to know everything. So if you started to do your cash flow and balance sheet and it was incomplete, and, you now want to have a conversation, you have to have what we mentioned it before, an adult to adult conversation. So for example, you might be thinking to yourself, he won't tell me anything. Now you think as well that is more in your own mind than is possibly true, right? He won't tell me.
And I think a good way to, I think people do have that fear. They know that their partner is anxious about talking about money, or they're afraid that they might be anxious about talking about money. So a lot of this is just starting out by saying, I've been watching a podcast and I'm interested in this now. And I know maybe I haven't been, but this is of interest to me now. And I do want to go through this information so it's clear to me.
Yeah.
everything that's going on. And I want to participate in this, going forward.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. People have a lot of fears about what might happen when that conversation happens.
Yes. And it comes out, I feel like it comes out with people, maybe, so I kind of go like, this is an emotion filled conversation. And this is kind of an emotion. So emotion filled is, I don't know where anything is. I looked at the cash flow and it's incomplete. And I don't know how we spend our money. And I looked at the balance sheet and do we have a retirement? Do we have money? I don't know. I was looking at it. Now I'm getting really afraid. People are saying, I watch this podcast and people are saying that you have to know, right? Now, somebody that is on the other side of me, right, is just going to go, it's fine. Don't worry. And you have shut that conversation because they love you. And they don't want you to panic, and you look like you're panicking.
You're panicking.
And that conversation ends in a don't worry, a pretty little head. And it will, because it's completely emotion filled. If you go, I want to look at our cash flow and everything that we're spending and our balance sheet and everything that we have and everything that we owe. Can you show me that?
Yeah. And
it does. There's no more. That is an adult asking for adult data as part of your family unit. It doesn't need, I'm scared, I need qualifying it. You're asking it, and someone has to say to you, yes, I'll show you, or no. They might say, why do you want to know? Well, I watched a podcast and I'm interested, and I feel like I might be vulnerable if I haven't got the status. So I'd like it. How do we sit down together? How do I get that together with you? Can you sit down and show me? Can you let me in on everything?
And where can we keep this information so that if either of us need this information, that it's available to everybody. It's not just available to one party or the other.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a pretty straightforward, I've seen the podcast and I just kind of want to go through this. So I have an idea of where we are now. And then maybe every 6 months we can sit down and just have an idea of where we're going, and then we can talk about intention and direction and if things are really off. But, the first thing is to just get the information and for everyone to be calm. It's not a 5-alarm fire.
No.
And a lot of the reason, I was speaking to Amanda before this, but a lot of the reason that men sometimes are hesitant to have these conversations is there's a couple, I call it the bro blockage, but it's, a lot of men, for example, don't want to get something as simple as term life insurance, which is just a very simple, we can explain it later, but it's just somebody passes away and you get a payment, because they don't want to go through the process of thinking about their own death. Even though this is something every family, certainly with young children, should have.
Yep.
People just are resistant because the process of thinking about their own death is frightening, but they'll blow it off like with another excuse, right? You won't hear that excuse, which is their fear. You'll hear something like, I don't want people making money off my death, or some other kind of thing. It won't be, honey, I'm really afraid of dying, which is really what it is.
Yeah.
And after this year, or the last 2 years, everyone should have term life. But, or another thing is, men who have been managing and investing the money and doing best as best they can, and most men aren't, finance experts, they might feel a little hesitant that a third party, that someone else will be judging it. And when people come to me, I'm a third party judging it, and they want the judgment. So it's not that anything's wrong. It's not that there's, things are out of control. It's just that they don't want to be judged.
Yeah.
And so I think there's ways to talk to people who don't want to be judged, and being calm and non-judgmental is the best way to do it, right?
And I think if you do get shut down immediately, then obviously, you've got more work to do. I mean, if somebody after that very unemotional conversation goes, okay, yeah, I mean, bearing in mind that you may never have opened this book, so give it some time also, to kind of get into it. But, let's say they do go ahead and you do get everything, that's great. But if you are hitting walls, there are money narrative walls, there are this judgment walls, and you're going to have to try to figure out together how you're going to deal with it. It might be that you go to get a coach and you add the third party person who can go, let's look at it together and this is where we're all at, and that's, you know, how you should be. It also could be that, you know, in your relationship, you are having some communication issues. And again, if you've been totally locked out, it could be that. And but then wouldn't you rather know now, you know, and start to get it sorted? So, you know,
I think in
sometimes people feel bad, right? They ask a question and they get a very negative response for even inquiring. But you can't let it go. This is not a conversation where you can go, well, that upset the other person, I have to stay quiet. You can't stay quiet. You can't.
Yeah, you've got to, sometimes it's finding the person at the right time, and sometimes it's just gently insisting over a period of time. And this is how I've had women get their husbands to finally take up, you know, something like, you know, simple life insurance is, you know, what do you want for your birthday? I'd like you to actually go get life insurance. That's what I really want for my birthday. You know, like there's ways to do this with a bit of humor and levity and being consistent. And again, this comes back to what we're saying. Also, we want you to kind of be the best role model for your family. And you may have to role model the calm, even though you may not feel calm, you may have to be the one to role model calm adult conversation, so that that person who, for whatever reason, because of their history, because of things that happened in their past, they are uncomfortable about money, they will slowly feel more confident coming into the money cage where they can have a conversation that's just a helpful one. I think it's the rare, and this is really, I've done a lot of, I've been doing this for quite some time. It's really the rare case where the husband wants to hide all the money and doesn't want anybody to know. That's really kind of like yesterday's game. It still goes on. And those things do happen when people circle around towards kind of the dissolution of a marriage or relationship. But for the most part, the reason that people have a hard time talking about money is just because of their money narrative and their money history, and that they have not, this has not been role modeled to them. So they don't know. Their parents didn't role model good conversations. So they just don't know. And it takes a little while. And sometimes you have to be the adult and sometimes you have to be the leader, but over time you can get into much better, healthier, consistent patterns with talking about this.
And what are the benefits of that? The benefits are that you then get two people in your team, which you talked about at the beginning, all going the same way. So you don't get, and you know, we said there can be in partnerships somebody who does spend, you know, a little bit more in one area or another area. But if you're on a team together and you're looking at your cash flow together and you're looking at your balance sheet together and your goals together, then what that means is that you have then internally between the two of you a coach, you know. So I do it with my husband, he does it with me, and it's because we talk unemotionally about money. We get to do that. So like, he's never allowed to go to a toy shop. He goes absolutely bananas. I mean, we have 3 kids and he goes nuts. He can't do it. So you don't go into a toy shop with your children. They will big eye you into everything. But, you know, whereas I can go in for like one thing and come out with one thing, even with 3 kids. So you kind of you become each other's coaches for the better of your family, for the better of, you know, like you're role playing for your kids, for your friends, for your family. You know, you start to have this security. You know, this is part of that cycle as well. I mean, this is what we're all building you towards. That stability is being able to have an adult conversation about money that doesn't erupt in someone screaming at another person, slamming out the door or walking away or not getting the information.
Or
that
becoming,
is stability.
Or becoming disparaging. Like I had an email the other day where a husband was like, you know, where it was a husband with a wife. Oh, you don't know anything about money. Oh, this is not an adult conversation. This is a playground conversation. Yeah, that kind of tone is what children and bullies on playgrounds, and that is not helpful. And if anyone says that to you, you've got to say that isn't helpful, and it also doesn't answer my question. Yeah. So there's ways to kind of come back at somebody and to set boundaries. And sometimes you have to set firm boundaries with someone who hasn't learned how to speak like an adult. Yeah.
Because some people are speaking like a parent to a child, even adult to adult conversations, or they could end up talking like a child. Like,
Right.
please show me,
Yeah.
please
Or
give me. That's
please,
not right
please.
either.
Yeah. Women,
It's got to
well,
be,
no one should have to be like, please show me this. It should be,
yeah,
let's sit down together and do this.
yeah,
Like, don't start with the please, or maybe I'll be lucky, or
yes,
just
yeah,
sit down. Let's go over this together. This is
yes,
what people do, and we have to do it together.
yeah.
Right. So
Would it be
one
okay
hand,
if
yeah.
there's no choice? It's
No,
not,
it's
if
not.
you're okay or not, there's no choice. This is like, sorry,
It's gonna
sorry if you're
happen.
not okay. Let's get you okay, but we're going to talk about it, you know, like,
Yeah. And another way to say, maybe they, if someone tries skirt size, you say, okay, well, maybe now's not the right time, but this is something I want to talk about. Let's put a date in the diary and say, let's go over it. And I do that with my husband sometimes, because my husband, is running around and he's got a million things. He's juggling a profit and loss for somebody else. So I do say, listen, this weekend, let's just take, a half an hour and go through this and make
yeah,
some decisions around some stuff. And I will say on this point, kind of circling back to what you're saying about the spender, often the person that earns the most feels like they get to spend, to dictate all the spending. And actually that's not fair. And I think people have to realize, women are working if they're taking care of kids and doing all this is all work, right?
yes,
So that kind of argument doesn't sit well. It shouldn't sit well with anybody. But I think this whole thing about spending is, maybe 1 week or 1 month, the guy gets to spend on all the things that he wants, and the next month it's the women. But people should take turns, right? It shouldn't just be this lopsided spending experience either. And it may be that one person is more of a saver and they don't really want to spend, but there should be just very calm, rational conversations. Also, if you have to cut back on spending, that everyone gives a little. It's not just
yeah.
one person giving up
And that
everything.
and again, like the last, things we discussed, like, if you're on goal, if you've got, 25 times your yearly expenses saved, if you are on track, like
Yep.
there can be a bit more, of a relaxed tone to everything, or spending, etc. But like you said, if you're not financially where you both want to be, and it's both of you, like secure wise, and you have to discuss like that, I will, my secure number is different than my husband's secure number. Okay. And we discuss that kind of yearly, actually, to kind of bring it in alignment. And that's fine. That's a good discussion to have. And we're interested in it, I think. And like Andrea said, I also do monthly accounts, which I send, over to my husband. And then we definitely sit down to talk about it in detail with some of these long-term goals, like the 2 to 5 year goals, twice a year. So kind of summer and, at the beginning of the year, we kind of do every 6 months, a big talk. And it's great because it focuses you and it says you are going, we are not on track, or I am concerned about this, but just talking, not screaming, no emotion, just talking, because all that clarifies things and you can hear it too. Because if you are overload with emotion, you tend not to hear what actually someone's saying, and two people can have a conversation that is exactly the same but sounds different, and you're like, hold on, aren't we saying the same thing? How many times does that happen in your office? I can't even imagine.
Constantly. And it is funny, and I find that sometimes people don't want to get into the details of this because they're in a little bit of denial. Also because they know probably deep in their heart or in their stomach that they should be doing different things differently than they're doing, or they should be saving more, they should be investing more, they should be doing something that they're not doing. And it's just they don't know how to go about having the conversation, so they just would rather not have the conversation, right?
Yeah.
It just and it's this is neither a conversation that is fun or not fun. It's just a conversation that has to not just have once, but it should be something that is ongoing and regularly.
Yeah.
And the quickest way to go ahead. I was going to say.
No, I was going to say, I mean, there's so many things of a content of this conversation. Once you crack open your lid, of your this box that may never have been open, so much stuff can come out, like, yeah, and we don't know. We can never possibly know. You're talking about individuals out there, which we can't know. I mean, someone might say, oh, I even heard, my husband basically takes his yearly bonus and he puts it into bank account that I don't have a bank account number of, so that we don't touch it. And I'm like, fine,
Right.
but you've got to know the bank account number, because if something happens to him and he dies, how would you know where it is and to get
There
it?
it is.
And I am definitely of the, you want to get everything out. These initial conversations when you crack this open is to try to get everything out.
And
what are we investing in? And you don't understand all the speak. Start to listen and say, I don't understand that. Does that mean that we're making this us?
right. And so this is really something that we will do one whole podcast on, and that's dealing with financial advisors, of which I'm one. And I can tell you there are a lot of people who are very good in this industry, but an awful lot who are not, and they're primarily salespeople. So it is, and I've seen honestly the end of some marriages, unfortunately, because the husband got involved, meaning he committed money to something without the input of his wife, and the whole thing went sideways or disappeared or whatever. It was kind of one of these scams or just a very poorly thought out investment approach. And it's led to the end of marriage, and that just didn't have to happen, right? It makes me upset when I see things like this. And the truth is, if your husband is not a finance person, this is not his background, that there's certain data points you need to know when you're using other people to invest your money. You have to know how much they're charging, and I mean the percentages. You have to know what has been guaranteed and what's not guaranteed, and what promises are around it. How, if you can access your money at any time. There's a lot of this stuff which we'll cover separately. But
I think that needs a dedicated, that needs a dedicated podcast.
And I think sometimes men don't know the details, and they know they don't know, and they're embarrassed that they don't know. And so they don't want to have the conversation. So the point is not to shame and blame. It's just to open up Pandora's box, if you will.
Which it could be for you.
And start it, because it's easy. Once we know where things are, it's easy to correct them. If the problems linger because the conversations feel too uncomfortable, it just doesn't get better down the road. I think that's the.
And I think that, to just speak a little bit, there has been hundreds of years, a default mentality, which is that women aren't good with money. And it arose from, the medieval times when they were marrying daughters because they didn't trust them with inheritances. And it carried on, get married, and, you've got this wealth, you've got to marry her off, right? It can't stay with the woman. They're no good at money. These crazy women out there. And I think that this has come down. And you'll say it factually, and I'll say it too. It's not true. Okay, there is no, you said it at the beginning, there is no default chromosome within your body that says that you're a man and you're good with money, and you're a woman and you're bad with money. So there is education, knowledge, learning,
experience.
We are very emotional women, but we can put that aside and kick in our, our like unemotional brain as well to talk about stuff. So I
think men are emotional too. They've just been taught from a very young age
to suppress
it. I think that we're all mammals, and we all have the same makeup. We have just been conditioned through society to behave certain ways. That's all.
And we need to kick that conditioning out, because there are numerous amazing women investors. There are numerous amazing, women who manage businesses and huge, groups and things like that. So it's not something you can't do. It's just something that potentially up to this point, it just wasn't, you didn't grab a seat at the table for whatever reason. Okay, but now you're going to grab a seat at the table. You're going to put away your emotion, and you're going to ask questions until you understand everything. And that is entirely possible to do.
And this is, I think, the homework too, is that people, if they haven't had these conversations, that they start having them. If you are having them, continue having them, but make sure you've got the data, and that you're both going in the same direction, and that it's a very calm, natural conversation. And you don't have to talk about it every day. It doesn't have to be like this, and it shouldn't be. As long as you guys are on the same team and going in the same direction, that is the thing that matters the most.
Yeah. So homework is really writing down what it is that you don't know or have been afraid to ask. And maybe you list it all out first before you sit down, and like I said, I mean, you might, you've done this podcast, you're kind of writing down, I don't know what's for retirement. I don't know what will happen if my husband, the income earner at the moment, because I have children and I'm taking care of them, what will happen to us? So this isn't a thing of write that down, go to your husband, he's kind of drinking his cup of coffee. You're like, you're going to die. And I need to know where everything is. Okay. Not to do that.
Don't do that.
We want you to write down everything that you don't know in your relationship about your finances. I don't know the cash flow. It could be that. I don't know the balance sheet. I don't know what our assets are. I don't even know, sometimes I'm even a bit unsure what is an asset. Like, go and Google it, write down, do we have this? Do we have savings? Do we have any investments?
Do we have debts? Do we have debts that I don't know about?
Do I have debts? And then, if we have investments, where are they? Whose name are they in? Who do they belong to? How do I get
How
them?
are they titled? How are they titled? Who's on the title of things? Yeah.
So you have to go and write down this list. And ideally, your homework is to write out, header relationship questions, because there are other podcasts coming about other conversations you're going to have with different individuals. And so as an adult, you're going to have to start to get into like, okay, this is the relationship list of questions. Like, do you have this data? Are you all on the same page? Do you have something for retirement? Where is it? How do you get access to it if you don't even have a clue? So you need to
if you have children, that you also you have wills, and that you understand you have guardians for your minor children. So there's a lot of list of things. I mean, we'll keep talking about the things that you have to have, but that's a huge one. What happens if we both die?
Yes.
What happens? Who's in charge of the kids? Where does the money go? Do we trust the people who are, it's an estate planning issue, but that is also the kind of conversations you have to be having.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll add as well, I did a whole ton of work with Tidy My Money on financial snapshots, trying to list out all the things that you own, which if you haven't got a will and you don't know what will go into it, that's a great way to sit down and work out, like list everything out as well. But this would come from that balance sheet list that we talked about as well. Everything there should come out. And so your homework is to start that. What are the things you don't know? And if you're point blank, you don't know, you have to start. You have to get into it. There is no way around it. You are too vulnerable if you know nothing about the finances in your home.
Your household.
And it isn't okay to say, but I'm taken care of. It isn't okay to say that.
Right.
It really isn't.
That doesn't mean anything, to be honest. It literally doesn't mean, and even if something was to happen to your spouse and you were the money was there, if you really don't know how to manage it, if you really don't know who the advisor is or the lawyer is or whatever, you've got different problems, and you again open yourself up to vulnerability, to having something work against you just because you don't know, right?
Yes.
Haven't been involved. So
and we've talked about, a ton of money can go very quickly when you don't know what you're doing. And so your nest egg, can go. So there is it's just taken care of by another person. You don't have to have, a financial planner knowledge when no one's asking you to make a product to sell to people in the financial market. It's not that level of knowledge. It's basic knowledge of your cash flow and your balance sheet. Where is everything and how does it function, and how are you a part of it as well? Right. How do you get it later if something happens to the person that's managing it?
That's right.
And that's it. That's the first level. Gives you a great stability, towards and working towards your security.
And I think so our next podcast I'm going to be leading on, and we'll be talking about how we talk about money with friends, and for kids too. How do we, deal with our kids and money? But I think if this conversation is in place, and this conversation that we talked about today is healthy and solid, those conversations with friends, family, and other people become much, much easier.
Yeah.
So this is really the one we want to make sure is running smoothly.
Yeah.
And then the conversations with other people, even other people, become easier.
Yeah, because this is inside your unit. This is really important. It's as important as talking about like how, if you're eating right, if you're sleeping
Yeah.
right, like if everything's in order, this is like as important. It's a foundation in your
Yeah.
house, really.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, well, I think we gave everyone a lot to think about and homework to do. And then we'll come back with episode 7, talking about conversations with friends and with your children. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thanks
Ciao.
very much. Bye.